Hello everyone, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. The main objective of this video is to show you that it is possible to model CLT and to show you how to further detail those CLT elements using native Revit features. And then I will also go over a few future timber tools which are more efficient ways to do what you can do manually in Revit. So to jump straight into that, basically Revit allows you to take control of the original elements and subdivide those using a feature called parts, and that can be controlled by using the parts visibility in one way. So we can switch between show both, so original and show parts. If we're on our original, we see a familiar elements here. So we see roofs, we see floors, and we see walls. But then if we click onto parts, at the moment we will still see only floors and roofs until we actually create them as parts. And now we will see parts. That's one part. So these parts can then be further subdivided into smaller elements, and those smaller elements can be managed and manipulated even further, and will act as CLT geometry with enhanced information that can then be passed further down the line towards a manufacturing model. So there's a lot that can be done quite easily using the native features here. So if we go to the wall and we create a part and we make sure that we're in parts, sometimes it's quite easy to forget which setting we're in over here. So we're definitely in parts, it is a part, and we want to subdivide this now and create a lintel over these openings. So the way that we would do this manually is that we would click on the divide parts over here, which pops up automatically. If you happen to find yourself on a different tab, it's on the modify tab. So we click the divide parts, and then we enter into this different type of interface over here. What we need to do is to edit the sketch, and here we can see that we have the work plane. It's showing us where the work plane is over here, and we can see that's obviously not what we want. So if that's not correct, we need to set the work plane first onto the face that we want to do the cutting on, and then we are able to go ahead and create some lines from the draw command here, and we can just do that quickly here. And let's just make that bigger. And we'll just drag those ones. And we want to have a little sill seat panel over here. So we'll draw it like that. So the main thing to pay attention to here is these lines need to extend past this little dotted box. If they don't, then the part won't be split. So for example, if I bring that back down, we can see it's not breaking that line there. If I press OK here, it doesn't split. We can see sort of the split line there. But if I edit the sketch again, I can then quickly just bring that up, and we can see that's done there. So now we have these little subcomponents of the original. So the interesting thing about this is that the subcomponents are hosted within the original element, and whatever modification is done to the original element won't be lost on the parts, but the parts won't automatically adjust, of course. So if I am moving this opening and going back to parts, we can see here that the original sketch lines have not moved, and so you'd have to move those again to recreate the lintel above there. So this is a good thing, especially when we are considering like builder's work openings, for example, or any type of opening in the object. So if we go back to original, and if we cut this into the original, and then we go to parts, we can see that the parts also get those cuts. The good thing about this is if for whatever reason, if we needed to delete this wall for whatever reason, the holes still remain because they've been hosted into the original object. But if we actually cut those into the part instead, and we had to delete that, of course we would, or any of these, of course we would be losing the association to the, even to the original, because it was hosted into the part. So that's just something important to pay attention to. It's better to cut to the original object so that the modification phase is quite easier. I mean, generally that's how you split manually. So if you want to do a slab, it would be the same thing. You need to first of all create a part, and then you need to divide the part. You need to ensure that you are in the right plane. So at the moment we are in a different plane over here. If we see that we can cut it that way, but in this case we want to be in the top plane. And then you'd be able to draw lines along that plane. At whatever percentage you needed them to be, and cut the part like that. And then you could further cut it along here as well if you needed there to be like a split line in the middle. Of course, I'm drawing this very skew. You know, representing somewhat of a sort of a spanning onto that beam arrangement. So the same thing is it can happen on the roof. So if we wanted to create some parts of this, it's the same idea. Editing the sketch. Here we can understand that the plane is on this level over here. So if we were cutting, it's important for roof slabs at slopes, if we're cutting along here, the cut is not going to be as we would like them to be. So for example, if I'm cutting here and here, we can see that the cut line has actually gone plumb or vertical. So you wouldn't typically cut that like that. You would actually want it to be perpendicular. The solution is to set the correct plane, and then you'd be able to cut perpendicular on that plane, as we can see there. So those are quite important things to understand. So that's the manual way of doing this, which is doable, but as you can see, takes a bit of time. You have to play with the plane and draw the lines. The nice quick way of doing this is taking advantage of the Future Timber Part Split tool. So here we'll just go select all our elements, give it a standard distribution width, and let's say we want to select all the windows and openings. If we'd like, we can preview it to see what we're getting. So that doesn't look very good. Let's go 2, 3. Okay, let's go with that. So now we have that split. Let's do the slabs. Actually, let's do this a bit differently. Let's see both. Let's split this slab using that beam as a reference. Now we have our little subdivided areas, and then we can split all of them. Let's have that spanning that way, have that spanning that way. Let's have that spanning that way. And that one can span onto there, and that one can span onto there. So we need to input a minimum width. Let's make that bigger. Okay, that's fine. So then we've done all that splitting. You can see it's done it perpendicular, so the way the tool works is it always finds the plane, because that's normally going to be the desirable result. But now let's see, we have some sort of areas like this where we have a bit of clashing, we have some steps that we don't like, we have a steel element here that shouldn't really be clashing. So this is where it gets really interesting using the edit divisions. We can actually take advantage of that to remove some portions of the panel, and we can also use a feature over here. If I just do it to all of them in one go, select only the parts, we have show shape handles, so we can tick that, and that actually gives us access to the panel's geometry. So we can, for example, do this over here. At the moment we're seeing the original object as well, so if you just go to parts, you can see that we've brought that down. So in this case we still have a bit of a problem with the bearing over here, so what we can do is the edit division, edit sketch, we can actually just align that, and we've broken it here because the lines aren't joined. And then we can show the shape handles again, bring that down, and now we have a nice, quick, detailed arrangement over there. And we can do the same thing for over here, for example, if that needs to be at the same level as that, and if that needs to be at the same level as that there. But here we have a clash, so we can just move that over there. Here's an interesting one. The wall is actually thicker, and it is half bearing onto the slab and half over. And this is was originally controlled by the extension length of the offset. So if we put that back to 0, you see it moves it up and down, or 200 to be at the same level there. So if that is like that, and we go back to parts, you can see we don't have the ability to manipulate that shape anymore. So if we go back to original and we change that back to -300, let's say, then we have the ability to manipulate those handles again. And that gives us an additional handle over here, but normally wouldn't have to play with that. Then let's say we have our elements over here, so we could easily just drag these back, use even the align command. Let's just do that. It's creating a conflict down over here because the slab edge has been manipulated. So in this case here, you would go back to the original, move that along, go back to parts so that you don't actually have that, and then we'll deal with this edge in a different way. I mean, yeah, this is one way of dealing with that. The other way is we could just let's go back to the original, and we can actually just exclude this. We can actually just solve this in the division of the sketch. So let's create a box over here. And we can actually just exclude this. that excluding that will mean that this element is of course not visual, but it's also it's not schedulable, so it actually becomes a non-schedulable item. I like to just pin those as well. And if we edit the shape handles, then we now have a bit more flexibility, and we could do the same thing on this side. Edit division, edit sketch. We can draw a little box in there. That also gives us some more shape handles to use over there, and we can just quite easily create a gap for our steel. And you can do that same type of technique if, for example, you needed to bring this wall down over here for a cutout, which would be a little bit tricky to deal with in the original. I'm not sure how you deal with that without going into the edit this. You could do it that way, I guess. But if you still wanted it to maintain its attachment to the roof, you can solve this in parts by editing the division again, making sure you run the right plane, adding in a little block. It basically just doesn't even matter what size it is, to be honest. You just really want to be using that. And now you have a way to manipulate this edge. And you should, in theory, be able to manipulate the angle of this as well. So if you go to Edit Division, Edit Sketch, and we set the work plane to okay. I'll have a look at that. There should be a way to be able to cut the edge of that, as you can do on the slabs. Edit Division, Edit Sketch, pick a plane. No, it's okay, well, that's something for a future video, how to cut the edges of these to be able to manipulate. So for example, you needed that on a cut over there. But that's yeah, same thing here as well. If we needed to get rid of that, same idea. We can just create a little box, always extending past the dotted line, exclude, and we're able to then manipulate with our different commands, or just dragging it manually. So that gives an incredible amount of flexibility on how to control the shape of the CLT. And then, of course, you can go further with that and use another tool here. For example, if you wanted to half lap these things, this is not really to do with splitting, but just showing off the feature. Let's see how this behaves. There's some unique things going on here, so it should be interesting. Okay, seems to, yeah, doesn't like the roof plane there, which is correct because you would never have that. And those actually have worked pretty well. That's not how you would have it, but you can always modify this here. And then you have a CLT panel. Could in theory have half-lapped everything. So that's basically it on this one. Here you can add tolerance, for example, on how to create CLT from original Revit roof, walls, and floors, how to split the CLT, how to do it efficiently with the part split tool, and then how to modify it further, how to have quite a lot of flexibility on modifying these elements like that. Great. Well, I hope this has been of use for you. If you're interested in these tools, get in contact. The details would be in the description. Thanks very much, and goodbye.